And then through the trust, you're building loyalty, and you're building confidence, and you're building comfort in your suspects. And when you're good at it and they believe you, oftentimes those people you're working on will step in front of a bullet for you. But if they see your mistake, or if you cause them to question something, the same people that will step in front of a bullet for you will drag a straight razor across your throat. And it's the law of the land. It's the law of the streets.
Okay, yeah, it is. Now, ATF was always known for their work against the bikers, so it's no surprise that you guys were targeting Hell's Angels. How did that come about? Was it a part of a strategy, like a national strategy? We're going to attack the Hell's Angels. Let's come up with this undercover scenario we could impose upon them? Or was it a matter of opportunity? There was an opening and ATF seized the moment.
Well, it's a combination. ATF and the outlaw motorcycle gangs, they're almost the perfect fit, almost the perfect cops and robbers combination because of ATF's jurisdiction into violent crime, into guns, into explosives, elements of narcotics. That's the biker gang. That's a lot of what they're involved in. So they're a natural adversary for us. The case I worked on, the Hells Angels case, in the western part of the United States, the Hells Angels were running wild in Arizona. They were unchecked. And
what year are we talking about, Jay? Jay, what years were you talking about?
The investigation I worked on started in 2001 and ended in 2003. It was roughly a 2-year assignment. And, the violence was extreme. And then really what capped it off was now infamous gun battle between the Hells Angels and the Mongols that took place at the Harrah's Casino in Laughlin, Nevada, which was an open gunfight and brawl that was literally captured by hundreds of casino cameras. And it was played on national news. And these bikers, these characters that had always been part of Americana, glamorized in some ways. In
many ways, TV shows and movies and mainstream media, they always came up with some traction and, as you said, some lionization almost of being this outlaw criminal.
Well, typically in that world, the violence had stayed within that culture, gang-on-gang violence. But we were seeing more and more of those gang clashes affecting the public and endangering the public and spilling into public venues like it did in that casino. And we decided that we needed to try to do something about it.
All right, so what was the plan? How did we wind up getting Jay Dobyns undercover in Hells Angels?
Well, to be honest with you, when I was asked to lead the undercover case, I actually told the case agent that I could probably name 10 or 15 agents who I thought would be better in the role that I played than I was, because I wasn't a biker investigator. I didn't have intimate knowledge of the culture and the protocols and everything that takes place in that world. He convinced me that, that I should try it. And I don't know that I was ever a great undercover operative, but I was always willing. I was always willing to try. I was always willing to take the dirtiest assignment and see if I could make something happen. And so that's what I did.
That's half the formula. That's half the formula to success in our business, right?
For me, it was as much an experiment as it was an investigation, because I was going into a world that I was large part unfamiliar with, and I was figuring it out on the fly. Again, after 15 years of street experience going into that, I was figuring things out all over again, new.
Interesting. Let me just interrupt for 1 second to let the audience know that we're aware we had technical problems in the beginning. We may have lost some audio. I'm watching the screen here now. In the corner of my eye, I see some pictures going around. So it looks like we're still having a little trouble there. But get on the internet. Let us know if there's any problems. I can't see it from here. That's the only way our engineer could tell. Let us know if you can't hear what Jay's saying, because he's got a fascinating story here, and I don't want anyone else to miss it. So, Jay, we have this national strategy. Again, you were saying that the outlaw motorcycle gangs were sort of not following their own rules anymore. They used to keep the violence just amongst themselves, kind of like the organized crime families did. They didn't want to bring attention, and they know if you let that violence spread, when it becomes too, much that the public starts crying out for law enforcement, they're going to have to take actions that maybe they didn't do before, sort of when they kept to themselves. So we have this national strategy. You were approached by this case agent. You thought you wouldn't be the best agent. You were clearly wrong. All right, on that regard, I think history is going to prove that. And what was the strategy to get you in there?
Well, we went about it in a very unique way. We actually infiltrated another gang to get to the Hells Angels. We basically extorted our way into a motorcycle gang called the Solo Angels, which were based in Tijuana, Mexico. And we leveraged and pressured our way into that gang. And then we used the credibility from that association to present ourselves in front of the Hells Angels as people that were already part of their world, already part of their culture. Because we did that to try to escalate and advance and speed up the introduction process. Because these guys, it's not like
let me interrupt
these guys' door.
Jill, let me interrupt you for a second. I want to ask you, you talked about getting into that first gang. Without giving away sensitive information that I understand there might be, could you tell the audience a little bit more of how you sort of pressured your way into that gang, what ATF did to get you in there?
Sure. There was an outlaw motorcycle gang in Tijuana, Mexico, that had the gang name of the Solo Angels. And we knew that they were hurting. We knew that they were down on membership. We knew that they were down on money. And we basically approached their leadership and said, we want to be a part of your gang. And we're going to get you next to the Hells Angels, the biggest, baddest, most famous motorcycle gang in the history of motorcycle gangs. And we almost extorted our way into the Solo.
Were you presenting yourself as another motorcycle gang? Who were you presenting yourself as?
We were just guys that were riding in Arizona.
Okay.
That were, my cover story was that I was a debt collector and that I was running firearms into Mexico. And I told the Solo Angels that whole story. This is my game. This is what I'm up to. But we want to take your gang. We want to bring this little gang that's in Mexico. We want to make you bigger. We want to make you stronger. We want to expose you. And we can do that in Arizona because we can befriend the Hells Angels. And we're going to make you more powerful through your friendships with them, which we are going to be the liaisons to. And they half reluctantly agreed. And then once we were in with them, we immediately started putting ourselves on display in front of the Hells Angels as Solo Angels.
And I think one of the questions the audience always has with undercover operatives, especially those who go to the mob, those that go to motorcycle gangs, there's this belief that you had to sort of, cross the line for them. They made you do something to prove yourself. Did that happen? Was there some sort of initiation? Did you have to, commit some crime, at least appearance of that, to get their trust to be accepted?
Well, that is part of that world, but we tried to beat them to the punch. We actually set up a series of what we termed street theaters, where we would allow the Hells Angels to see us in criminal conduct. We would let them see us buying drugs or selling drugs, buying guns and selling drugs, being involved in beatings and all kinds of criminal activity. What they didn't know is that they were ruses, they were plays where the people that we were working with playing other criminals were actually other undercover agents. And we did that. We did that to avoid their tests. We didn't want them testing us because we knew the difficulty in overcoming those tests, but we wanted to prove to them and gain street credibility and control it ourselves. And so we let them see us in all kinds of criminal activity, but it was all fake. It was a bluff. It was all hoaxed for their benefit.
Great work. That's just great work.
And it worked. The more skits that we put on for them, where they saw us, acting and looking and behaving like criminals, the more credibility we gained. And they didn't need to test us. They didn't need to mud check us because they were already seeing it with their own eyes, hearing it with their own ears. I characterized it as inaccurate conclusions from accurate observations. We accurately let them observe all the things that they wanted to see. They inaccurately concluded that we were thugs and criminals and gun runners and drug dealers and murderers. They decided that on their own after the skits and the plays and the street theaters that we ran in front of them.
And how long did it take to you to run these skits to finally start getting close to the Hells Angels?
Well, it took a while. It's like, like these guys, like any major organized crime outfit, it's not like you knock on the clubhouse door and ask them to fill out an application. It takes time. You have to gain their trust and you have to gain their loyalty. And as they lowered their guard, we just kept pushing and kept pushing more. And so it took probably a good 6 months of just being in their face on a daily basis to really advance it and escalate it and get to the point where we could, see and hear the violence and the crimes.
So, Jason, I'm looking at some of the questions that are coming in now. Another question. While you were riding with them, were you living with this group on a day-to-day basis? Were you going home at the end of the day? And if you were living with them, what about, lifestyle things that agents maybe shouldn't be doing in their lifestyle? Did you have to approach that problem?
Really hard. I had undercover houses. I had 3 undercover houses that I lived in during this case. I spent very little time at home. And living that lifestyle full time with these guys as a law enforcement officer puts you in all kinds of perilous situations and compromising situations. And, I had 15 years of undercover experience when this started. So I had a lot of tradecraft skills as to how to escape that, how to escape the drug use, how to escape, introductions to women, all the little test drives and all the things a part of that lifestyle. I had become fairly skilled in how to avoid those. But it was hard, all day long, every day, living with these guys is brutal.
Okay, so let's move on. We start getting closer to the Hells Angels. Tell us how that case starts to develop, what you were going through, what you saw them doing. And then in the course of the conversation, tell us about a Hells Angel. Kind of give us a psychological profile of the motorcycle gangster.
Well, as far as the membership, I don't think they all fit the stereo. I think we have a stereotype of what an outlaw biker is. Truth be told is that there were some guys within the gang that fit the stereotype, obviously. But there was others that, they didn't drink, didn't smoke, got plenty of sleep, went to the gym twice a day, got all their protein and led healthy lifestyles. We worked on, one of our suspects was an America West pilot. This guy was a commercial airline pilot that was literally captaining flights and had hundreds of passengers on his planes. This guy was a full-blown Hells Angel. If you were sitting next to him at the Starbucks or standing next to him in the grocery store, you wouldn't know that. And this was a dangerous cat now. So, they did, the biker gangs went to school on traditional organized crime and how traditional organized crime took their game underground and weren't so flamboyant and outward and easy to spot. And they learned from that. They built the hierarchy within the gang, with various levels of control and various levels of power and supervision, so that the people at the top of the pyramid were insulated by all the workers underneath them.
Yeah, very interesting. And some of the questions coming in had to go back to what you were saying, how you trained yourself to say no. And some people are asking here, can you give us a little bit more, when confronted with drugs or a prostitute, how did you talk your way out of it?
Well, for me, I had several tiers as to how to avoid the drug use. You can say no, and then if they push it beyond that, I played the role of a debt collector, and at that time, at that point in time, we were still using digital pagers, and I
remember those times,
right? And I would take my pager out, and I would say, when this pager buzzes, I have to go. I work for a guy that when he calls, I have to go pick up his money. And if I'm stoned or if I'm drunk or if I'm high or if I'm incapacitated and I don't answer that call, he'll never call back again. I used that as an excuse. I had a tattoo I have a tattoo of St. Michael on my arm, which, as your audience probably knows, St. Michael's the patron saint of law enforcement. It has the angel stabbing the serpent under his feet. It has the angel killing the devil. I used that tattoo, which we embrace in the blue community. I used it to my advantage. I would tell guys that were pressuring me in the drug game, you know what that stands for? That stands for my overcoming my addiction. I used to be an addict. I lived that lifestyle. And once I beat it, I got that tattoo to symbolize it. So I'll do anything else you want to do. I'll prove myself any other way you want to prove it. You want to go rob the gas station? You want to go shoot somebody off the corner? Let's go. Me and you, right now. Don't make me use that drugs, because I was there. I lost everything. I lost my family. I had no money. I had no car. I was on the verge of death. Like, you want to test me? Test me some way. Let's figure it out. I'll prove myself to you. Just don't make me prove myself that way. I don't want to go down that road. And if I do, I'm no good to you.
And Jay, did it come up when they said, hey, we're going to go out and beat someone up or shoot somebody? And obviously, as an ATF agent, you could not partake in that. Did that happen to you? And if it did, what did you do?
Yeah, there's a lot of physical violence. There's a lot of beatings in that world. When I was present, when someone would, be taking a beating, obviously you can't stand by and watch it as a law enforcement officer. You have to try to intervene. But I didn't want to give up my cover either. So what I would do is I would get to the middle of the fight. I would get to the victim, get him in a headlock, throw some legitimate punches on his head, and give the other people in the beating, give the Hells Angels the appearance that I was fully participating. In reality, what I was doing was trying to protect that victim's head so that he wasn't going to take a steel-toed boot to the face or be incapacitated or be, receive brain damage or be killed. And I could contain the situations that way because I could take over the beating, and, I'm not going to kill anybody throwing a couple punches at him, but in essence, I could rescue him, and as people escaped, I could maintain my cover and stay in role and enhance my credibility at the same time.
And Jay, I'm thinking back to these criminal activities that we always had to get approved before we engage in that. Did you get approval from the Department of Justice to engage in a limited amount of criminal activity so you can carry on your activities undercover and have the protection of the law behind you?
Yeah, of course. When you're spending 24 hours a day with these guys, every time a crime opportunity pops up, it's not like you can break away and make a call to an attorney. We had blanket approvals to buy drugs, to buy guns, and a lot of it was eliciting conversation, having people talking about the violence, and then trying to be, at times, a good witness. And then, there's a line as a law enforcement officer that you cannot cross when you're working undercover. If you do, you ultimately are no better than the people that you're working on. If you could just act as outrageously and recklessly as you wanted to, where's the challenge? Anybody could do it. You have to play within the rules of the law enforcement culture and our policies and the laws, and still be believable in the criminal community. And it's difficult to do. There's a fine line there, but you can't cross it, because as soon as you cross it,
that's right.
You're in essence, you're no longer you no longer hold any value as a witness in the courtroom.
Well, you're right. And you bring up a number of things, Jay. And I wanted the audience to understand that when we, and by we I mean law enforcement, especially on the federal level, send you guys out there into these dangerous situations, we have to give you some cover. We have to allow you enough latitude that you can do your job. But again, we can't let you loose where you lose sight of who you are and we become no better than the criminal himself. Not to mention the fact, as you said, when we get to court, everything you've done is going to be exposed. And if we shock the conscience of the jury and the public, we're going to lose the cases. And that's always a concern, is it not?
Well, the most common defense tactics that we see in undercover work are the first, outrageous government conduct. A defense attorney is going to say, this undercover operative was so outrageous and so reckless in his conduct and the way he handled himself during this case. He's no better than my defendant. we want to defeat that. The other one, is the entrapment defense. They're going to say, you enticed my client through the way you acted and the things you did into committing crimes that he wasn't predisposed to commit. He didn't want to do these, but he wanted to impress you, or he wanted to be with you, or you overstated the value of the potential crime. And so you have to be a good undercover operative knows the law, because you have to know how to play within the rules that are set up, like in essence through our Constitution and then all of our state and federal laws. If an undercover officer could just go out there and break laws and then hide behind, well, I didn't want to reveal my cover, there wouldn't be much challenge to it. But you wouldn't be anything more than a criminal yourself in the process.
Exactly. And Jay, as we've seen happen before, weren't you always concerned that you or anybody undercover, if you go too far, you lose sight of who you are. You forget yourself. You forget that you're actually a law enforcement officer, and sometimes you pass the point of no return. Have you seen that happen?
Well, I was always, every day, I reminded myself as to who I was, what I was doing, what my objective was. But to be honest with you, and this is a degrading story. This is a humiliating story, and it's not one that I take any pride in telling. But I was so ingrained in that role that it started becoming who I was versus what I did. And I would come home on the rare occasions when I came home, I was still in role. I was having trouble turning that personality and that character off. I'd come home and my wife would say, you can't come to our house after being gone for an extended period of time and treat us like we're on the street, treat us like you're suspects. Mm-hmm. And, then my argument, my self-defense argument was I'm not a light switch. I can't turn this character on and off. And then her response to that was well, you better install a damn dimmer switch and turn that down when you come to this house, because that ain't flying. And to be honest with you, this is, it's humiliating to say, and it's regretful. And I only see it now on the back end after having left that lifestyle. But I abandoned my family for that case and for that job. Hanging out with my suspects and trying to prove my case and trying to gain evidence became more important to me than being at home and being with my family. And man, that's an embarrassing thing to say about yourself. And I take no pride in it. It's humiliating to say, but I'll say this, and I think Jackie Garcia would probably reaffirm this in his own interview, is that anybody that's working in the deep cover infiltration type case, if you dabble in it, if you treat it like it's a hobby, you end up dead. Mm-hmm. And I knew the consequences were huge. I made mistakes in the case as far as how I handled my family. And man, I created a huge amount of battle damage on my home front because I got so deep into that character.
Well, Jay, I don't think you have to be embarrassed by what you say, because in law enforcement, especially narcotics and some of the violent crimes, those of us who work the cases on the street, even if we're not undercover, that adrenaline gets flowing. I remember my days as a cop when you turn on those lights and siren, and it's just something that gets in our blood. And I think everybody has to take that step back and remember, we have to go home and treat our families like our families and put that behind us. And it's not always easy. And it sounds to me like you were pretty successful at doing that. The statements coming in on the side here you can't see is, I can tell you, people here, they're calling you an action hero, a real live action hero, on the notes I'm getting here. Jay, I have a lot of questions backing up, by the way, but let's get into your day-to-day activities that actually led to bringing down the Hells Angels. What were you doing then? What were the kind of activities that you were involved in or witnessed? And then, how did you put that case together?
Well, real briefly, before I answer that, those comments coming in characterizing me as a hero, I guarantee you I'm no hero. I walked alongside some heroes. I worked alongside some heroes. The reality is is that I'm a common man who was put in some uncommon situations and just did the best I could, like pretty much everybody out there, trying to just do the best they can every day to survive. But those days, you know, like during this Hells Angels case, it is really hard. It's very difficult to become a Hells Angel. It's even more difficult to do it as an undercover cop, and I'll tell you why. If you're just an out there, if you just want to be a gangster, you want to be a Hells Angel, you live the life of that prospective member. And when your day starts, and you go through your Hells Angels activity, and when the night ends, the night ends. But as a cop, as an undercover cop, your day starts before their day. You have to meet with your team. You have to brief what your plan is, what your objectives are for that day, what you intend to do. Then you run all day in this undercover role, using this fake persona in gangland. And then when their day ends, your day doesn't end. Now you got to go debrief, and you got to log evidence, and you got to write reports, and you got to plan for the next day. And so, you know, after running with these guys, sometimes 15, 18 hours a day, and then going through the processing and the police work that followed it, you know, towards the end of this case, like I was literally working on 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night. And I would get to my undercover house and literally cry myself to sleep like a baby, like boo-hoo cry myself to sleep, thinking, I can't do this. I can't go one more day. And then I would charge my battery a little bit, get up the next morning, and I'd be like, okay, I think I can go. I'm going to be good. I'm going to be good. And I'd run through it again and cry myself to sleep that night, just in exhaustion and frustration and fear and all those things. And I did that for months and years.
Well, take us through a typical day with the Hells Angels. Take us through a day that led to their demise. Well, not the demise, at least to that case. We know they still exist. But
Sure,
at least in the case you did. Yeah.
You know, I'll give you a good example. I'm at my undercover house. My phone rings. It's a Hells Angels member. Get your guns and get over to the clubhouse right now. Okay, what's going on? Don't ask questions and get over here. All right? Show up over at the clubhouse. A bunch of gang members are there, and they briefed me. I was in Phoenix at this point. They briefed me. You're going to Las Vegas today, and there are some Bandito motorcycle gang members who are going to be at a party there. You're going to go up there, and you're going to kill them. And we're going to follow you. And when you meet them, when you see them, if you don't kill them, we're going to kill you. So now you're caught in between the suspects that you're working on, a new set of suspects that are now your murder targets, and you're sent alone to go figure it out. Now, luckily, in the 5-hour drive between Phoenix and Las Vegas, I was able to contact some Las Vegas Metro police department officers, tell them the predicament I was in. Those cops went out and found my suspects, detained them. So I show up at this target location with the Hells Angels watching me, intending for me to shoot these victims, or if I didn't shoot me, and I'm standing there like I'm ready to go to war for them. In their eyes, from their perspective, all they saw was me showing up there and waiting and ready to take care of business and ready to handle business for these guys. The suspects don't show. We go back home. I come back to Phoenix with the hero's welcome because they really believed that I was ready to kill people on their behalf. They didn't know that I had circumvented that actual confrontation on the way there. But
how did you do that, Jay? How did you sneak away and meet with Las Vegas Police Department guys? How'd you pull that off?
Yeah, I didn't actually separate or sneak away. I was just using my cell phone. I was calling people and saying, like, look, you know what? This is what's going down. And if these cats show up where I've been sent to, it's going to be a bad day for everybody. So find these guys and make sure you lock them up and hold them in place so they can't get there. But like situations like that, you know, getting called in and having a package. Hey, take this package from point A to point B. Well, sure, okay. Don't open it. Make sure you don't open it. Don't look in it. Well, you know, we're cops. We're curious. We're not just going to go deliver something someplace, not know what it is. So we'd stop off somewhere, have a police technician x-ray it, find out what's in it, and then go make the delivery, controlled delivery. We were buying drugs all the time. My role as a gun runner was I was acquiring guns. I was telling them, once I get a load of guns together, I cross them into the border in Mexico, and I can make a lot of money down there. Guns are worth a lot more in Mexico than they are here. So I was constantly on the hunt for guns. Every day I was chasing somewhere, trying to go get somebody's gun, buy somebody's gun, trick them out of their gun, all enhancing and supporting this persona that I was a gun runner.
Jay, so when you got a call like you just described, saying be at the clubhouse right now, did you call your handling agent first? Did you call into ATF headquarters, let them know you're on the way, or were you on your own?
Yeah, I called my case agent and said, hey, I don't know what's up. I'm being told to come over here and bring my guns, and he's rallying the team. They're always, behind the power curve trying to catch up. But my personal attitude towards my cover team, which my cover teams over the course of years, not just in the Hells Angels case, but over the course of years, saved me many times. I love those tactical guys and what they do. But I always viewed those guys, I always looked at my situation as being on my own. Like I had to figure this out myself. And I figured that the SWAT guys, the rescue teams, whoever was coming in to make a rescue of me, if I was in danger, if I was hurt, if I was shot, I always in my own head believed the best these guys are going to do for me is come in and get some retribution and hose my brains off the porch. I never relied on them
Right.
internally, mentally, or emotionally. I only relied on myself.
During this time, were you ever wired transmitting to them? Or if you could say, and it's no case now, with their wiretaps going on and places being bugged, so maybe they could pick up on things that you didn't hear, or at least hear you in conversation and know what's going on, rather than just waiting for you to report it in?
Sure. There was times when I had a transmitter on. There was times when I had a hidden recorder on. Now back again, this is, a good 15 years ago. Some of the technology that's out there now wasn't available. We were still duct taping wires to our back. We were still hiding 1 watt Kel with 9-volt batteries in our boots and in our crotch. And, I would sometimes take the Kel, which is, for the people that don't know, it's probably, the size of a cigarette pack, which has 2 9-volt batteries in it and 2 wires coming out of it. It has an antenna coming out of one end and a microphone coming out of the other. I would tape that, duct tape that into my groin area and then run the wires up because I wanted to be able to survive a pat down. I figured they'd pat my arms and my legs and my chest and my back. I was counting on the fact that they weren't going to get too aggressive in patting down my groin area. So that's where I hid my wire. And then, as you know, man, those 9-volt batteries, those things heat up.
Yes,
when you got a 1 watt Kel stuffed under your nuts and that thing starts getting hot, it's uncomfortable.
So did they ever pat you down to the point you felt one more inch and they're going to discover something?
Yeah, I took pat downs. I actually was suspicious. There was one of the suspects that was very, very paranoid. And on that given day, I told the case agent, I don't feel comfortable wearing a transmitter in here. And sure enough, whether it be intuition or spidey senses or just pure good luck, I was in a men's room and that suspect came in and pulled a gun out on me and said, hey, drop your pants and lift your shirt. Now, had that been a day where, I was wired up, man, that's a tough one to talk off, even for the best operators, even for Jack Garcia to talk that one off.
You would have to make some quick decisions, I imagine.
Well, yeah, and I think that, there was situations. There was a situation once where there was a guy in a tavern. I'm surrounded by my suspects. There's a guy in the tavern who says he knows me. He says, man, I went to high school with you. And he wouldn't stop. And I actually went over to him. I said, dude, you mixed up with someone. Yeah, I'm not who you think I am. No, yeah, you are. I know who you are. You're Jay Dobyns. I went to high school with you. We did this, we did that. Wouldn't stop. He was drawing suspicion. He was making the people I was with uncomfortable. And I literally was at a loss for how to try to solve that. And I walked up to him and I told the bartender, you need to dial 911 right now. And she said, like, why is that? And I said, because there's going to be a fight in here. And I knocked the dude out. And is that the best way to handle that? No. Is that within policy or the proper way to handle it? No. But the situation this guy was creating for me was literally life or death. Because if he compromised me, or if he created a level of suspicion that caused these people that were around me to suspect me, to question me harder, or to become physical with me, I was like, hey man, you know, hitting the guy in the mouth is better than having a bullet put in my head or a baseball bat on the back of my head.
Yeah, you know, I've seen that scenario a couple times on television shows where somebody recognizes the undercover agent. You don't expect it to really happen in real life. Kind of ironic to hear you say that, because I remember some shows having seen that. Another question came in, and you may have already answered this question. They want to know, what was the most dangerous situation you found yourself in, and how did you handle it?
Well, there was a point in time, I told you earlier about these street theaters, these bluffs we were running. And I went to the case agent. Well, to back up a little bit, very early in the case, I went to the leadership and asked them, what should I do if I cross paths with our adversaries? What are your instructions for me? And I was told, you need to kill them. That's what we do. We kill, at the time, the Hells Angels were in a big rivalry with the Mongols motorcycle gang in California. If you see a Mongol, it's your job to kill him. I put that information in my back pocket. Towards the end of the case, I approached the case agent and said, I want to bluff the murder of a Mongol. And we did. We took a member of our task force. We took a seized Mongols motorcycle gang vest, put it on a member of our task force. We used some cow blood and some cow parts from the butcher. We brought out a homicide detective, and we dug a shallow grave in the desert, put our victim in the grave, duct taped his hands and feet together, sprinkled him with blood, and made him appear that he was shot in the head, and took pictures of him. Then we went back to the Hells Angels and said, hey, these were your instructions. We crossed paths with this guy. We killed a Mongol. And we presented information, evidence of this fake murder to them, trying to sell it to them that it was a legitimate homicide that we had committed on behalf of the club. So when you talk about, or to answer that listener's question, you know, what was the most perilous time? I'm surrounded in my undercover house by 5 Hells Angels, and I'm presenting them evidence of a faked, bluffed murder, trying to sell them that it's a legitimate homicide that I committed on their behalf, not knowing how they were going to react to it. I didn't know if they were going to be pissed off that I hadn't implicated them and made them complicit in a homicide, if they were going to reward me. I didn't know what their reaction was. It was a very, very aggressive move on our part, but it worked. They bought it. They believed me. And at that point, that's when they said, you've shown that you got what it takes. You took care of business for the club. Welcome to the gang. And one of the members actually took his vest off and put it over my back and said, man, you're our brother now.
Interesting. It sounds like a mob ceremony or an induction. But during this time, Jay, inherently as law enforcement officers, we want our suspects to say and do things that are incriminating, that we could bring to trial. Did you ever find yourself, maybe in the beginning, speaking almost as if you were trying to lure them in? And did you find them at any time getting suspicious because it maybe sounded as if that's what you were trying to do, whether you were doing it, subconsciously or whatever? Did that ever become a tip-off you were concerned about?
Well, like I said, I had 15 years of undercover experience before this case started, so I had a pretty good street rep. I had a pretty good hustle as far as what I said and how I handled myself. But as you know, and as your law enforcement audience knows, or maybe we'll find out, what I found personally is that undercover work is, in essence, doing an interview with sunglasses on. If you can interview a victim of a crime, if you can interview a witness, if you can do a field interrogation, if you can go into a prison and question an inmate, If you can interview a source of information or an informant or a civilian, you can work undercover. You're trying to elicit information through conversation. You're trying to like stage your questions, stage what you do, what you say, trying to get a response. And then you want that response from that suspect to be original. You want it to be their words, not your words. You don't want to put words in their mouth. You just want to give them the opportunity to say what it is they have to say. Sometimes it doesn't help your case, and you're running a recorder and you live with it. That's, Michael, I think like you would agree with this. Any moral or ethical law enforcement out there that's conducting himself or herself in the job with dignity. Now, we're not about creating criminals. We're not trying to make someone into a bad guy that's not. There's plenty of criminals out there. We don't need to invent criminals. But the ones that are, we want to find out what they're about. We want to find out what they have to say about it. What did they did? What are you going to tell me? Because when you're telling me what you did, man, that's tough to overcome when you're in a courtroom.
The truth usually makes the best case, does it not?
Well, you know what? Ultimately, that's what we're trying to seek. We're trying to seek the truth. And sometimes during investigations, we find out the truth, and the truth does not benefit our criminal case or our what we're trying to prove. But you know what? That's good. If you look at it from an ethical standpoint, it's good, because if you're just trying to get to the truth and your suspicions are wrong, you want to know that you're wrong. You want to find out what the truth is.
And, that comes into not just undercover operations, Jay, but when I teach investigations now, take those blinders off. Because if you go approach an investigation, whether you're undercover or just an overt investigator asking questions, if you say, this is what happened, my job is to prove this and prove he did it no matter what, you're ruling out all of the possibilities, some that you may have drawn the wrong conclusion. So I imagine in your case, even that much more important not to have those blinders on and go in there and say, let every man speak for himself. Let his actions and his words speak for himself, and the truth will tell who deserves to be prosecuted and who doesn't, if that's the case.
Well, it's like the famous line from Training Day where Alonzo Harris says, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. There's a lot of times out there as an investigator, man, we know in our heart what happened. We know in our heart who did what. Proving it is oftentimes difficult. There's people on the streets, there's criminals out there that we know committed a crime. We just can't prove it. But at the same time, if we believe someone committed a crime and then we prove that they didn't, we can't disregard that information because we don't like the result or the answer we received.
Right. Because that's our job, again, is to get to the truth and nothing else. Right?
Absolutely.
Jay, let me think, there's a story I remember from the time I was a young FBI agent about this FBI agent goes undercover in the mob, and he's, kind of semi-living with them, and he gets real sick one night, and he wants to go to the hospital. It's like the middle of the night, and he calls some other FBI agents, and no one's willing to come out of bed, pick him up, and take him to the hospital. But then he calls his mob friend, and he's there right away, and he takes him in this great bond. I heard the story so much, I don't even know if it's true or not. I tend to doubt it is. But my question to you is, in your undercover capacity, whether it was the Hells Angels or anybody else, did you develop a bond with somebody for whatever reason that you really did feel that you were betraying them and that you really didn't want to bring them to justice, even though that was your job?
Absolutely. I think it's very prevalent in some of these deep cover situations. You can never completely eliminate the human factor. You can't eliminate like your natural compassion and sympathy for some people. There's people that I ran with, there's suspects that I ran with who I saw do bad things, who I saw do violent things. But then I would see another side of them. I would see a side of them with their families, with their kids. These people slept at my house. I slept at their house. I broke bread with them. I held their babies. Not every second, every moment of their life were they acting like criminals. And then I'd be present for a crime or participate in a crime with them. And I would be thinking to myself, man, I wish you didn't just do that. I wish you didn't just say that, because I don't get to ignore this. My job is to document what I did and saw and heard and felt and report that out. Ultimately, I'm not going to be the decision maker. A judge and a jury will decide that. But there was people that were arrested in this investigation that, that I had compassion for, that I actually liked, that were in that environment, were actually pleasant to be around. And, to be honest with you, for me, I've never taken satisfaction or gloated in somebody else's humiliation or somebody else's embarrassment. When you've infiltrated an organization, or when you've tricked someone, even an individual suspect, and you've deceived them, man, they're embarrassed. They're humiliated. They know they got scammed. I never found any joy in that. I never thumbed my nose at anybody, because I tried to understand, even for a moment, what it was probably like to be in their shoes, to know, man, this person that I loved, this person I trusted, this person I lowered my guard down, turned out to be a cop. And now he's going to report everything I said and did, and I'm going to go to jail for it. It was my job, and it's what I did, and I tried to do it the best I could. But I didn't find any inherent joy in knowing that my investigation was going to mean that someone was going to spend a portion of their life in a cage.
Did you ever meet another undercover agent, someone you work with, who stopped doing undercover work because of that feeling? They just couldn't live with sort of living that double life and then betraying people?
I know that there's people that ultimately become very uncomfortable with it because through their maybe through their upbringing or through their character, they just are not comfortable deceiving someone and pretending to be someone they're not. Inheriting that persona and using it to trick somebody. Whether it's a character flaw of mine or not, I never had a problem with that because I knew the context from which I was doing it within. I always felt that in my role, I'm serving the American people. I'm taking up for people in my community and standing in between the violence for those that can't or won't stand up to it themselves. And if this is the technique that I use, and if I'm good at it, then I'm going to use it. But yeah, there's people that struggle with that, absolutely. And I understand why.
Which is why, as we've discussed, you have to go through a screening process. At least every law enforcement agency should do that. The screening, the training, to make sure we have the right people, not only for the benefit of the case, but for the benefit of our law enforcement officers, because we don't want them to suffer long-term from these operations.
Well, I think that, in my personal opinion, right, and I did undercover work for 27 years, which is probably not healthy, emotionally or mentally, not healthy. But during that process, man, there's ups and downs. There's emotional and mental ups and downs, and it takes someone really hard, mentally, emotionally, and actually physically, to do that job for an extended amount of time, to just lie over and over and be a deceiver and tricking people. It takes a toll on you in your own brain, in your own head. It messes with you.
Interesting. Getting back to a little bit of the nitty gritty here, some of the questions coming in. Someone's asking, how much drugs did you see get moved during your operation alone? What kind of drugs? And even now, how much drugs are the motorcycle gangs really responsible for in terms of trafficking in this country?
Well, I think that they have their hands in massive amounts of drug trafficking. In all honesty, in my case, and some people, especially the suspects, is what they use to deem our investigation in some extent a failure. I never saw huge quantities of drugs with these guys. Whether it was because I wasn't good enough to get next to the volume, or I wasn't good enough to get next to the people that were handling the volume. I saw drugs. I saw drugs every day, but it wasn't like I saw a tractor trailer of cocaine, or that I saw, a bedroom in some stash house, stacked floor to ceiling with methamphetamine. Do those situations take place? Yeah, these guys are great couriers. They have great connections. They're international. The Hells Angels have membership on every continent, with the exception of the ice caps. And probably the only reason they're not there is because you can't get a motorcycle to run when it's 40 degrees below zero.
Okay, fair enough.
They're everywhere. That one of their mantras, one of their mottos is that the sun will never set on a Hells Angels patch. There's actually more Hells Angels now in Germany than there are in the United States. And it all started here. The biker culture, the outlaw motorcycle gangs, that's America's export to the organized crime world. Organized crime comes to America because there's money to be made here. There's opportunity. It comes from Italy and Sicily, and it comes from the Orient, and it comes from Russia, and it comes from Africa. It comes from San Salvador and Central America. That organized crime comes here. But the biker world, man, it started here. It originated in the United States. It's Americana. That's our organized crime export to the world. And they're everywhere now.
So, Jay, when the case wrapped up, how many people were indicted? What were they indicted for? What kind of sentences were handed out? Kind of give us an idea of, was it a 2-year operation, I think you said?
It was 2 years. When the case closed, we indicted, I think, roughly 50. We had 50 indictments. I think we ran probably 30 or 40 search warrants. We had 16 RICO defendants.
Can you just explain to the audience what RICO is?
RICO is it's the federal racketeering charge, which, in order to make a RICO case, you have to display a series of what are called predicate acts or criminal acts that qualify under the RICO statute, and there has to be a series of them, and there has to be a number of people involved in the racketeering organization to bring it. It was actually, as you know, the RICO law was put in place to attack organized crime.
Which it did quite effectively. Yeah.
It was put in place to attack traditional organized crime, but it applies, across a broader spectrum than that. Now, in all honesty, what is it angers me to say this to some extent. Our case was to some extent imploded internally. There was issues over discovery. There was issues over what the government would or wouldn't allow the defense attorneys to have. And the case agent and ATF began arguing with the prosecutors and DOJ over how this case should be prosecuted. And the internal argument became so great that we almost dismantled our case internally. Like the good guys fighting the good guys. And so ultimately, we ended up, in many cases, offering reduced sentences and dropping charges. And it was not, our prosecution was not nearly as successful as it should have been because of infighting. And as the operative, as the guy who was out there, like on the streets with boots on the ground, blood, sweat, and tears invested in the case. When the people that are sitting behind the desks start arguing and blow your case up, it's really frustrating because they weren't the ones out there taking the risks and putting their life on the line. While I was being sent on murder missions and running drugs aground and faking murders, they were buckling their cufflinks and adjusting their neckties. And then ultimately, for them to crash what could have been, should have been an amazing prosecution is very frustrating.
Yeah, I'd like to say I'm surprised by this, Jay, but you and I know that this happens often, and the audience would be quite surprised to know what goes on behind closed doors. Jay, I also know there's a lot more to your story than we discussed tonight. Max, could you put up a picture of Jay's book? Jay, we're going to show a slide there. We want the audience to see the book you wrote. Tell us a little bit about it, Jay, and where people could buy it.
Well, the first book I wrote was called No Angel, and it is a memoir of my infiltration of the Hells Angels. And then actually last summer I released a second book called Catching Hell, which is the front story into the Hells Angels case earlier in my career, and then the backstory. And the backstory is pretty rough. You know, I received death and violence threats. My house was burned to the ground. Threats on my kids, threats to gang rape my wife, threats to inject me with AIDS, all kinds of violent threats and actions. Like I said, my house was burned to the ground after the case ended. That is part of the Catching Hell story. But both of them, you can find both of them on my website, which is jdobyns.com, JAYDOBYNS.com.
Jay, you've been a terrific guest. It was great having you. Thank you for your patience in getting through those initial technical problems we had, which creep up every now and then. And you may not think so, Jay, but I can see by what's coming in from our audience, the world sees you as a hero. And we thank you for everything you've done for our country, buddy. I appreciate it. It's an honor to have you on my show.
Very kind. Thank you for having me, and to your audience out there, be safe. For all you guys out there in the in Copland, and to everybody else, have a great 2018.
Thanks, Jay. We'll be in touch, buddy. Thank you. Everybody, you heard a great show tonight. This is one person who's really seen it all, and we really want to thank Jay Dobyns for being on. Everybody, please go to YouTube, as I keep asking, and hit that little bell icon, become a subscriber to Crimes and Times. If we get up to 100, we can increase our platform and broadcast on more platforms than we have now. Once again, join us next week. We're going to follow up with another interesting case. Jay, do you remember the John Gotti case?
Oh, how could
New York?
You get it, man? Sammy the Bull ended up out here in Scottsdale and set up an ecstasy ring.
Yeah, there we go. And he couldn't keep his cover, man.
Right?
These guys, they live by the sword, they die by the sword. We're going to have on George Gabriel, who was the FBI agent who led the investigation to take down John Gotti on. We'll have him on next week. So everybody tune in to Crimes and Times. Good night, Jay. Thank you. Good night, everybody. We appreciate your time. Sorry for the difficulties. We'll see you next week.